Hey, team players, it's Bob coming at you. It's Monday. Local football flavor is here. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of things related to news, related to underdog, related to a lot of different things to think about as we go into the back end here of best ball season as we get ready for redraft season. So I want to, before we get into best ball mania today, I just want to talk a little bit about some playoff schedules, some things to think about, and just some general kind of adages when we go after certain types of players. So I'm going to pull up some things and we're going to talk, we're going to chat, we're going to draft, and it's going to be a good time. So as we as we all know, looking at this playoff schedule here, as we all look at this playoff schedule coming at us right now, the things to think about as we look at weeks 15, week 16, week 17 in particular. I'm going to try to zoom in here so we can see this a little bit better for everybody. But these are the things that I'm kind of thinking about as we move into the back end here of best ball season, as we have been thinking about all best ball season, is looking at week 15, 16, 17, and finding those interesting correlations. What's up, Jamie? How's it going, man? Finding those interesting correlations and talking a little bit about where we see different games moving and what directions we see them in. Just as an example here, you see that I have highlighted two different teams for a couple different reasons. Number one, you'll see I have highlighted here in orange Cincinnati. We've been talking a lot about how Cincinnati as an offense is one of those offenses that you really do want to have a piece of this season, as it seems like their defense hasn't improved. And I also have here highlighted New Orleans. New Orleans is also one of those teams where the defense is not necessarily where you necessarily want it to be in terms of, fantasy numbers, but you want to be able to attack New Orleans as well. So this is just kind of an example of a way or a pathway that you can use as you go into your best ball drafts, particularly in best ball mania, thinking about this week's 15, week 16, week 17, and thinking about correlations and thinking about stacking. Because we all know that there are going to be a ton of people out there that are going to own Joe Burrow, and they're going to own Jamar, or they're going to own Joe Burrow, they're going to own T. Higgins. But I want to kind of reflect on that in a different way, right? So here we have Cincinnati's in week 16, 15, 16, 17. We have them playing Baltimore, Miami, and Arizona. And we have talked about how all three of these games market really well for those three teams involved. And to say, all right, well, if I am drafting number one overall, for example, and I go out and I get Jamar Chase, I need to get to week 17, of course, and I do want some correlation to this Arizona game. But do I want it as high as I do with Trey McBride? Do I want it with Marvin Harrison? There are many different pathways you can take. But also, I want to take a look at this week 16 game, week 15 game, because in order to get to week 17, we need to get past week 15 and week 16 as well. So what can I do? How can I build? What can I see getting me to week 17, right? So taking a look at Cincinnati's schedule, they also have Miami in week 16. Well, that's a nice correlated thing. I might not be able to get Achane with Jamar, but I could probably maybe get Waddle and Chase and Tyreek. Maybe I can get a little build there for week 16. But let's take a look at this in a different way, right? Well, Cincinnati here is playing week 17 at Arizona, they're playing Arizona. Well, what if I then also think about how can I build in some relations to Arizona? I see that I have Atlanta here. Okay, well, Atlanta has also Tampa Bay and the Rams. And I could make a pathway here where I can draft correlated stacks, and I could see, could I get different pieces of this, of who Cincinnati is playing, and can I get some pieces that maybe over the course of the whole season I can build with leading up into week 15, 16, 17? I can. Well, as I look at a team like New Orleans, again, not a very potent defense, one of those defenses that you can attack with offensive pieces. Well, Carolina plays them week 15. Who plays them week 16? The Jets. Who plays them week 17? Tennessee. Well, as I'm looking here at Tennessee's schedule, I don't necessarily know if I want a lot of Tennessee guys playing in San Francisco week 15, week 16, but if I can get them to week 17 against New Orleans, it's probably going to be it's probably going to be not highly owned players getting there to week 17, as opposed to where, my Cincinnati players are at. So if I'm building a team, maybe it is that I want to play a little bit of Cincinnati here. Maybe I want to get a little bit of Miami, but I also maybe want to get New Orleans because, Kamara against the Carolina defense that wasn't that great against the run last year, that could be profitable. Even if you just attack Carolina here, for example, let's say, as Joe and I have been talking to you all about, let's say you want to go after Carolina and you want to have a Chuba Bucky pairing at your running back. Well, week 16, this is going to pay some dividends. Carolina wasn't the best rushing attack last year. Tampa Bay did have a decent enough rush defense. Well, let's flip the script maybe a little bit. Maybe I want to get Bucky, and maybe I want to also build a late Bryce Young with Adam Thielen or Ted kind of stack build. This also opens the door, as you may know, and as you probably do know, that Tampa ends up playing Miami here. Week 17. Well, I could totally build Achane and Bucky early, or I could build Achane. Maybe I build a little bit of Drake London, and let's say I go after Mike Evans third round. So thinking about this in ways that you might be able to get a little bit of an advantage on your opponent on the whole, as opposed to just stacking up certain builds that we all know are being stacked. So we're going to take a look at that today in terms of a best ball format. I also have here, now the rankings that I have here, these are just some stats pulled off of team rankings to kind of guide our discussion today and to think about a little bit further, right? As we know, all defenses change. All defenses can get worse. They can get better. But I think what I want to think about as we move into this specific draft today, as we talk about Best Ball Mania, is to take a look at completion percentage, take a look at pass attempts allowed, take a look at these offenses and see, maybe it could be profitable to take Trey Harris a little bit later. Maybe it would be better to take a guy like Waddle over a guy like JMO. So let's take a look and see a couple of stats pulled from team rankings to help guide our decision making today in our Best Ball Mania draft that we're going to do. So what you can see right here is some numbers that are the most passing attempts allowed per game last year. And we also have the most rushing attempts per game allowed as well. So this is from 18 to 32. I sorted it going from 32 to 18. These are all pass attempts over 33. Again, these come from team rankings. Anybody can access them from teamrankings.com. Tampa, Minnesota, Baltimore, and Detroit and Denver, all over 35 pass attempts allowed per game. So as we take a look at that schedule, let's take, for example, here, Tampa, okay? Tampa allowed the most pass attempts per game on average last year. Well, how can I use that to my advantage? Well, taking a look at their schedule here, I have Atlanta, I have Carolina, I have Miami. Let's say first and second round, I want to build into Drake London, or I want to build in maybe the 7th round into Darnell Mooney. Well, I know that I have a decent competitive chance that next year they're also going to be allowing a similar-ish, maybe a little bit less pass attempts per game next year. Let's say it's 30, right? Okay, well, Atlanta, Carolina, Miami, they all have pass catchers that could be successful if given a large percentage of passes per game. Well, let's take a look at offensive pass attempts per game from last year. This is offensive pass attempts allowed, or offensive pass attempts gained, again, coming from teamrankings.com. we look right here and we see that last year, Atlanta was passing the ball 32 times a game on average. We also see here that, where were we at? Wanted to take a look at Miami. Miami was also passing the ball around 34 attempts per game last year as well. And Carolina was passing the ball about 32 attempts per game last year. So these are teams that when things get competitive, when teams get down, we could take advantage of that in a build-in best ball mania. Now, taking a look again, these are the most passing attempts a game allowed. And you can see for a couple different reasons why they were. For example, Philadelphia. Philadelphia was a tremendous team rushing the ball last year. They only had about 17 pass attempts per game, or 17 completions per game, about 23 pass attempts per game. We'll take a look at the numbers there. But they allowed 33 because a lot of teams are playing catch-up against Philadelphia. A lot of teams, again, were playing catch-up against Tampa, playing catch-up against Baltimore and Detroit as well. Same thing goes against Cincinnati. As we take a look here and we see, well, okay, well, how many of those attempts were actually completed per game? Against Cincinnati, you're completing 64% of your passes. So if you, again, go to our schedule and say, okay, well, Cincinnati has Baltimore, Miami, Arizona. Baltimore down here was allowing one of the eighth lowest completion percentage. We also had Arizona, which was offering one of the higher completion percentage as well. So we can use that information to our advantage as we draft. Now, completions per game as well. Cincinnati was tops, 27 completions per game. Seattle, 24 completions per game. You take a look, Seattle also 34 attempts per game. Well, Geno Smith has just moved to the Raiders. We take a look at the Raiders schedule, and they have, in week 17, they have the Giants. They also have, where are we at here? Philly and Houston. So these are games where they are most likely going to have to play catch up against Philly, and Houston allowed the lowest completion percentage per game. So this can affect your decision-making here if you are trying to get after Brock Bowers in the second round. Now, as we look here, most rushing attempts allowed per game. Again, as everybody knows it, last year, Carolina was terrible. Appreciate it, Jamie. Appreciate it. So when we look at a team like Carolina, for example, Carolina was allowing the most rush attempts per game last year at 34 attempts per game. And you look and see, well, that kind of lines up to why they were pretty much trying to pass the ball a decent amount last year. They were trying to pass the ball 32 times a game last year because, again, playing catch up. You're going to see here, though, we have the Jets and New England. This is a week 17 game here, guys. They're both allowing around 30 attempts per game last year. Again, these things can change going into this year, but last year they were allowing 30 attempts per game. So there's a reason why, you might want to build a Breece Hall, Travion Henderson with a bring back of maybe with a stack of Drake May and maybe Hunter Henry in there as well, because they're going to run the ball against each other. Let's take a look at Jacksonville. And this is kind of one of the reasons why maybe a lot of people aren't really shying away from Jacksonville too much draft-wise. They're allowing 30 rushing attempts per game on average last year. We take a look at Jacksonville's matchups going into the back end here. Well, look at that. We have the Jets, another top end allowing a lot of rushing attempts per game. We see and we say, okay, well, maybe we could take advantage of Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, players like that. Oh, wait, we also have Indy week 17. Well, Indy's up here. again, with allowing a lot of rushing attempts per game. So as you take a look at these, we kind of want to keep these data points in mind, because yes, we can take a look at yards per route run. Yes, we can take a look at team target percentage as well to guide some of our decisions in the back end. But also, you know, we want to think about game scripts. We want to think about the narratives of certain games, and we want to make sure that the opportunities are going to be there for these teams to be successful in the long run. Again, let's take a look at most targeted players. This data, again, is coming from Fantasy Pros. Taking a look at the most targeted players last year, we have Malik Neighbors sitting there on average with 11 targets per game. Okay, 11 targets per game. And if we take a look at that playoff schedule once more for the New York Giants are sitting here with a schedule of, of Washington, Minnesota, and Vegas. Washington, Minnesota, and Vegas, most passing attempts allowed. Well, Minnesota, 36 attempts per game allowed. Vegas, again, 33 attempts per game allowed. And Washington with less attempts allowed than that. So going after a guy like Malik Neighbors first round, again, you know, the data's backing up that Malik Neighbors is a solid pick, an incredibly solid pick in the first round, at the back end of the first round in particular. Neighbors should have had the rookie right over Bowers. You're right. And if he hadn't missed these 2 games, he absolutely would have. But also this kind of plays into a lot of other decisions that I'm making as well and thinking about. You know, Joe's not a Drake London guy, and that's okay. You don't have to like a player necessarily to want to pick a player in a game like Best Ball Mania, because the targets are speaking for itself. 9.3 targets per game. Okay. Now, thinking about that in reference to a lot of the other information that we shared today, Atlanta, again, Kirk Cousins with Michael Penix Jr. We're completing, let's see, where's our stat at here? We're completing around 21 passes per game. Okay. Not great, but 21 passes per game. And they were throwing about 32 passes per game with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix last year. All right. We take a look at that playoff schedule. Again, we have Tampa, Arizona, and the Rams. Tampa, Arizona somewhere down here, and the Rams are not on this list of passing attempts allowed. But again, pairing him with somebody else like Puka, who has a shared correlation in week 17, you're getting 2 guys that approximately have about 10 targets a game. And that, for me, is enough to want to take players like them and build a team that is solid enough moving forward. But we all know those players can perform. So let's take a look at some players that maybe target a little bit later in the season or later in the draft that could potentially pay out for us in ways that maybe we haven't looked at before. Okay. Let's take, for example, and again, these stats come from 2024, and they're a guiding point, not necessarily a finishing point. Okay. Let's take Demario Douglas here. A lot of things have changed for Demario Douglas, but last year you're looking at about 5 targets per game. Okay. 5 targets a game, not necessarily something I really, really want to invest in, especially considering how many completions per game that New England had, 20. So it's not a really high percentage of the team's target share, but maybe that fills in a little bit differently with guys like Diggs present, with guys like Kyle Williams present. Again, something to think about as we move forward in these drafts. Here's Stephon Diggs getting about 8 targets a game. If that were to hold up in New England, we would hope that New England's completion percentage and also passing attempts per game could go up a little bit more. So these are all things to think about as we jump into our first Best Ball Mania of the day. So anybody in the chat that wants to join us right now, I'm going to be clicking Best Ball Mania at 4:08. And at 4:08, we're going to enter, and hopefully we can get some people that are in the chat right now to join us in a Best Ball Mania draft. We're about, it looks like a third of the way through tournament entries. The puppy 2 is almost full up. What was the super flex that was just joined filled up? The rookies and sophomores full up. So if you have any entries that you want to put into those, you probably want to get them in either today, tomorrow, or Wednesday, as that's most likely looking like it's going to fill up. The eliminator is about halfway. And again, the weekly winners is a little bit more than halfway here. So we're going to be popping into this Best Ball Mania draft using a little bit of the stats that we pulled up just recently to talk a little bit about what do we want to do in our draft. So I'm going to queue up a couple of guys. And we didn't talk about rushing attempts per game necessarily in reference to the rushers themselves. But as we take a look, if we were to go back to team rankings and we were taking a look at offenses, the offenses that had the most rushing attempts per game last year, and again, this is over 29 attempts. We'll even take 28, right? So this is the top 10. The top 10 of rushing attempts. Again, this comes from team rankings. You're going to see a couple of ads here and whatnot. But the top 10 in rushing attempts per game last year: Tampa, Atlanta, Indy, Buffalo. So that's Josh Allen. We get a little bit of James Cook in there, Ray Davis as well. Steelers. This is why we're not too worried about Caleb Johnson, guys. This is why we're not worried about that split with Jaylen Warren. Green Bay, we have Josh Jacobs there. You have 30 attempts to split between Gibbs and Montgomery. You got to think maybe that gets a little bit more in the Gibbs direction. Washington, this is your Brian Robinson, Jaden Daniels, Deebo Samuel number. If they're going to be around 30 attempts per game, how does that split itself up? Baltimore, obviously, you have a split between Lamar and Derrick Henry. And Philly, you have Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. Down here, those 21 attempts per game, maybe that's a little bit worrisome if you're going after Justin Fields and Brees, but not a bad stack. And this is kind of the concerning number here. We know the coaching shifts happen in the NFL all the time, but we really want to see this Vegas number get propped up a little bit more. 22 attempts per game. Cincinnati sitting there at 22 attempts per game. That's enough to get guys like Chase Brown in there, but it makes it a little bit concerning for Ashton Genty. 22 attempts per game. Do we want to invest in that? Okay. Carolina, Chuba, 24 attempts per game. I'm much more willing to take a player like Chuba at 24 attempts per game. Again, these numbers are going to change going into next year, but we're just taking this as a guide point. At 24 attempts per game, bottom part of the league. And we say, okay, well, I'm willing to invest in that in the 4th and 5th round, but maybe I want to pump the brakes a little bit on Ashton Genty in the 1st round. Again, this is just another way to think about your Best Ball Mania draft. We're hopping into a Best Ball Mania draft here, guys. Join us if you're in the chat right now. It's filling up. We're waiting for about 7 people. If you do join the draft, pop in, say hello in the chat. And again, we're taking a look at some data points from team rankings, from Fantasy Pros, and seeing how they align to the playoff schedules as we take care of this next Best Ball Mania draft that we're doing here. So we're waiting for 7 people in this draft right now. So going back to what we were saying about rushing attempts per game, we see down here a team like the Rams, Kyron, 25 attempts per game, good volume for a guy like Kyron. Do we want to continue to target a guy like Kyron, or is it better to kind of shift your focus down into Chicago, where they're running the ball around 25 attempts per game? Pardon me. And then as we get into the middle of the pack here, we have guys like James Conner, Trey Benson. If you believe James Conner, like myself, probably this is getting closer to the end of the line for him in terms of health issues and being able to stay on the field. Maybe it is smart to invest in a guy like Trey Benson, Kyler Murray. You got to think these attempts are split, relatively decent between the two. You've got James Conner probably running the ball about 20 attempts per game, Kyler Murray around 7. Brock Purdy's in this number with San Francisco as well. And we talk a lot about how Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball a lot. And we see with the injuries that happened with the backfield last year that maybe that wasn't happening as much as he wanted to, 26 attempts per game. Does that come up to that 30 number this year? Something to consider. All right, guys, we're jumping in. We're pick number 4 overall. Number 4 overall. If anybody in the chat is here today in there, let us know. Again, we have players like CD being available to us here. Minnesota, Chargers, Washington is the schedule. Chargers were top half of the league in passing attempts allowed. Minnesota as well. That's why I kind of really like CD Lamb going into this year. Yeah, you don't have to buy into a guy like Dak if you don't want to, but CD Lamb is an elite target earner. 10 targets per game. Missed the last 2 games of the season. Had he not missed the last 2 games of the season, he would have easily surpassed both Malik Nabers and Jamar Chase. So consider that. Again, as Jamie pointed out, Nabers did miss 2 games as well. So this is important numbers to think about as we draft. So we are going to queue up CD and Puka. Those are the 2 guys that I'm thinking about here at 4. I'm also thinking about Bijan. I've drafted a lot of Bijan and a lot of Gibbs, but I would like to flip the script here because I do think that there are some decent running back values on the board coming back to us in the second round. So we're going to take CD here. I know it's weird for some people leaving Saquon on the board, leaving Gibbs on the board, but as I said, we have a guy in CD that earned 10 targets a game last year. Again, these numbers can change. Maybe he goes down to 8. Maybe he stays at 9, somewhere in there. But he also faces 2 teams, week 15, week 16, that offer a lot in terms of passing attempts allowed per game. Hey, Ryan, what's up, man? So let me put this up here for you guys to see. It's just me today, so I have just a couple of things that I have to figure out there. All right. Ryan, I have a couple interesting offers on the table. Number 1, send Josh Allen for Bijan and Stroud. Number 2, send Goff and ETN for a 2027 first and Joe Milton. Do you like any of these? Dynasty win now roster. Ryan, I can't remember your running back situation, but honestly, I think Josh Allen is such an elite player in terms of what he can offer you on a balanced roster that it's going to be hard for me to move Josh Allen. However, with that being said, I think the first offer is a very interesting offer. The second one I definitely think about. Goff and ETN. If you're moving on from Goff and ETN, I think you should probably keep Josh Allen. But if you are moving Josh Allen, then I'd probably keep Goff. I think that the second offer is interesting enough when we think about, okay, that 2027 first could be used in a piece later on this season to maybe build a winner later on down the line, maybe week 8, week 9, somewhere in there, if I want to get some extra oomph. And Goff and ETN is not a big price tag to pay for a first, and you get a back end Joe Milton. Okay, that's fine. But the first trade is definitely an interesting one. And I'd like to, if anybody in the chat, Jamie, especially here, would like to send some ideas. I probably wouldn't do number 1 unless I absolutely needed to, Ryan. List your running backs in the chat so we can take a look at them. All right. So we're going to put in for Bucky here. So we got to start a Bucky and CD. That helps us with our schedule here. Tampa plays Atlanta, Carolina, and Miami. Tampa plays Carolina, which is one of the top teams that I want to attack in terms of rushing attempts. Miami's not necessarily at the top, but, we can take advantage of where we need to take these players at. All right. And now we have a decision between Marv and Garrett Wilson. I think in my mind here, I'm going to take Marv to get a little bit of that Cincinnati game. As we know, Cincinnati, we have actionable data that we can jump on. Cincinnati is one of those teams that is allowing, 33 passing attempts per game. That should be good enough for Kyler to be relatively successful. We also have information, especially on Garrett Wilson, that would have been a fine enough pick as well. So let's take a look as the board falls down. Yeah, I mean, Bones, I think number 2, for what it's worth, if you have Josh Allen, I don't really think that you also need Goff. I just like that first as a piece because I don't necessarily see in a redraft league ETN being super, super valuable, Bones, as we go further down into the season. And Goff, especially when taking a look at Ryan's current roster here, he doesn't really need Goff. Having Goff is kind of protection if Dak gets hurt, but I think you'd be okay running Josh, Dak, and Penix and Shook, to be honest with you. Getting that extra pick would be really helpful. Now, taking a look at your running game, I don't think you necessarily need to have both, but I don't see the Goff and ETN as being super useful to your team this year necessarily. Hoping that Jacobs, Kamara, and Brees all stay healthy is a big ask, but I think it could be worth it in the long run. And like you said here, Bones, it does really depend what that first is going to be. If that is a high-end first versus a low-end first, if it's a high-end first, I'm doing it. Second, third, fourth pick, I'm probably doing that. If it's an 11th, 12th, maybe an 8th, I don't know. There's a lot to play into that. I don't really like the first one because I don't necessarily see you needing to do that first trade, especially with all the quarterbacks that you have. I think Josh Allen is the best of the bunch, and Bijan is an upgrade, but I think it's not something that you need to necessarily invest in right now. All right, so taking a look at what we can bring up here, we're going to take Chuba as one of our actionable pieces, as we were talking about earlier in the show. Feel free to go back and take a look at playoff schedules and whatnot. We have New Orleans, Tampa, Seattle as being, Tampa is allowing some of the highest passing attempts per game, maybe some of the lower again in rushing attempts per game. But we do want to pair up Bucky and Chuba as a nice little back-to-back there. And we'll probably circle back and get either Waddle or Ridley here, maybe DJ Moore. You're welcome, Ryan. Yeah, and it all depends on what that first is, just like Bones said. I think that's really important to kind of keep in mind. As we all see the falling value of Rashee Rice, right now we're sitting in the 5th round. Depends on what that suspension looks like. If he's still there at pick 52, do we take the damage and jump on that in the 5th round? What do you guys do whenever you see Rashee Rice sitting there in the 5th round? Do you hope he still skates to the 6th round? Do you think it's a wasted pick going after and getting Rashee Rice? I mean, honestly, he's one of those guys that could be an elite option when we look at his targets before going down, before getting hurt. They were 7 targets per game across a, 3-game sample size plus a game where he got 0 because he got hurt. Do we take him if he's there? If he's there, doesn't help that it's a week 10 bye, but the value's good enough, guys. I don't know. I think we got to take him. 5th round for a player that, if healthy, if not suspended for a significant period of time, definitely worth your 5th round pick. Definitely worth a 5th round pick there. Even considering that you're going up against teams that had him as a 2nd round pick, so you're getting that extra value. Not a lot of teams drafted prior to the news have a combination of Bucky, Rice, and CD Lamb. So you're getting a little bit of competitive advantage if he plays. So we took Rice there in the 5th round. Not something we want to do all the time, but definitely something that we could take advantage of there. So Jamie does like that trade, Ryan. Jamie's a dynasty guru here. Goff and ETN offer that 2027 first can be Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams. If not, you have ammo to move up with your first. And that's what I was saying earlier. Having that ammo, having the extra first round pick for players that you're probably not going to be starting. ETN's probably not going to start for you. Goff is probably not going to start for you. You're not going to not play him over Josh Allen, and you're probably going to play Dak or Penix more than often than you would play Goff. So for me, if I can use that first round pick and get a little bit of a competitive advantage moving into next year, and even hell, right? Like if I'm not doing well and it's week 7, week 8, and I need that extra pick as ammo to get me to the player that I want to do, you can take advantage of that. So we have Rice on our team, which opens the door to some other interesting stacks if we want to take advantage of them. We're down here in the 8th round. As I've said before, DeAndre Swift, Caleb Williams, both interesting buys. We're going to buy into DeAndre Swift here. Usually DeAndre's not a guy that we buy very often. An interesting player enough, hearing great glowing reviews in camp. We'll see how it works out, right? So we have Bucky, Chuba, DeAndre Swift, CeeDee Lamb, Marv, Rashee Rice. Now, I'm not a big Stephon Diggs person this year. And again, Indy's not passing the ball enough. When we were looking at the stats there, it's about 17 times or 17 completions per game. So not elite numbers by any stretch of the imagination. David Montgomery and Caleb Johnson both splitting carries, taking advantage. Getting David Montgomery, I think, is a good buy here. So we have Bucky, Chuba, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, CeeDee Lamb, Marv, Rashee Rice. We want to build out that wide receiver room a little bit more. Round 8, round 9, round 10. Taking a look at some numbers that we were looking at over on Fantasy Pros. Even with the amount of attempts that were there, 6.9 in terms of that for Michael Pittman, pretty interesting. Josh Downs, 7.6. A decently efficient guy when on the field. He's also a player to kind of keep your eye on. But again, they weren't passing the ball at a high clip. Rashid Shaheed down here, 6.8 in the games that he played with Derek Carr. If Shook is healthy, we have to presume that with top 2 options healthy, all things considered, that they're going to be passing the ball a decent amount this season as well. It also builds in a little bit of correlation for us with Carolina week 15. We don't have anything for Tennessee week 17, with New Orleans, or a week 16 with the Jets. It's something to keep our eyes on as we go through this Best Ball Mania here. So we don't have yet many stacks going up for us right now, but we can definitely build them in. So Detroit plays the Rams, Steelers, and Minnesota week 15, 16, 17. We can have Montgomery as a bring back if we want to take advantage of, say, TJ Hawkinson, JJ McCarthy a little bit later. We'll take a look. So TJ Hawkinson goes pick 87. Josh Downs, TJ, interesting build there, to go along with Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin, and Nico. The news about Terry's very unhappy. I'm not excited about Terry up here in the 3rd. He's definitely one of those guys that maybe we want to pivot away from. We know that Tristan Wirfs is hurt for Baker Mayfield, but again, something that is actionable for us. We're going to take Kyler here. Now, I know many of our viewers, many of the fans of the show don't like Kyler. But again, he has rushing upside, has passing upside, and he's going to be facing teams in Houston. That's going to be a little bit of a worry because they don't allow a lot of completions per game, but Atlanta and Cincinnati do. So if we can get past week 15 with Kyler Murray, I think that we will be on the safe side of things. We also have Kyler to pair with Marv, which gives us a nice stack to build off of. Coming back around, if Ibuka is there, I think that we want to grab him. knowing that Chris Godwin might not be healthy, but Egbuka went here. So let's see what's on the board as we come through. Jalen Warren wouldn't be a terrible buy. Neither would Tyrone Tracy, but I think we're going to take Trey. Houston is one of those teams, again, like really rough. They had the best, they were the best in terms of completion percentage defended. So maybe we don't want to take Trey there. We'll build in Shaheed. It's a little early. I do like Tyrone Tracy as well, but we do need another wide receiver in the build. So not a bad team shaping up to be. A lot of players that, maybe we don't necessarily like or that we don't want to take very often, but in this build, we want to see and give them a chance to work themselves out. So the team is Kyler, Bucky, Chuba, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, CeeDee Lamb, Marv, Rashee Rice, Rashid Shaheed. Again, that Rashee Rice, if he doesn't play, we're going to be a little bit in hot water in the wide receiver room. If he does play, we're going to be more than solid. And it's just a question of how many games he does play. All right. So let's see where we have some more players that we can attack here. And again, like Joe has been talking about, players like Cedric Tillman, there was that stretch where 12 targets, 9 targets, 11 targets, bye week, 8 targets. How many pass attempts does Cleveland really have to spare this year? That's the biggest question. That's one of the reasons why you see guys like Jerry Jeudy going in the 7th instead of the 5th. It's also why you see guys like, why you see guys like Cedric Tillman going down here in round 12. We do want to hopefully get a tight end somewhere in here as well. If Dak is still there, building Dak would be nice. Again, I do think that maybe building in a Drake May could also be nice. Spears is a player that we want to attack as well. A little early there on Sam Darnold. So this is either Dak to go with CeeDee if we believe that, Dak is going to be relatively successful, or we can build in a Drake May with Kyle Williams as well. But I think we're going to go after Dak here. Fully healthy Dak to pair with Kyler. 2, 1-1 stacks, CeeDee and Dak, Marv and Kyler taking our 2 best weapons and capitalizing on that. And again, one of Joe's tight ends, number 1 tight end in terms of, playoff schedule for him is definitely Njoku. We have Cleveland running against Chicago, Buffalo, and the Steelers. Plenty of times that they're going to have to pass to stay in the game. I think either of these, whichever one is still available to us, because I do like Pat Bryant a lot. So I'd be willing to kind of wait on Pat Bryant. But Mims might have to be our guy here. Yeah. So we'll take Mims. And the reason for Mims, again, Mims isn't one of those players that is an elite option by any stretch of the imagination. Over, a whole season, he's getting about 3 targets per game. But it's the back half of the season that we kind of want to get in a sample size for us here. So just kind of pulling that up here for Marvin Mims. This whole part of the season, we're seeing numbers below 4. Then we get to about halfway into the season, and we're seeing 4, 2, 5, 4, 4, 5, 8, 5. If we can bring those numbers to, say, 4 every game, it's definitely a possibility that we can build that up. And as we go to offensive pass attempts per game, and we see where does Denver rank in all of this? They had 32 pass attempts per game. So you're sharing that now with Evan Ingram, Pat Bryant, Vele. The room is crowded. Troy Franklin, etc. The room, and Cortland Sutton. The room is crowded. But if he can carve out 4 of those targets a game, we could be looking at something decent, especially for where he's being drafted. And Denver was completing about 21 passes per game. So they were throwing about 32 and completing about 21. So if Bo Nix can get that percentage up a little bit more, we're looking at some good numbers for potentially for Mims. He gives us a nice little bring back stack, or a little bit of a bring back to Rushy Rice there. Not something that's like that we're over the moon about, but something that we'll take advantage of. All right. All right. Now, as you guys know, I like Ferguson as well. But I think one of the picks that we really need to keep our eye on in terms of drafting this year, when we think about Baltimore in particular, Baltimore is one of those teams where once they get into the red zone, they are targeting tight ends in a high rate. When we look at average targets per game for these tight ends, it's not super high. So Mark Andrews last year was getting about 4 targets per game, and likely was getting about 3.6 targets per game. But there were games where he had 12, 8, and 5. So it's those 12 targets per game that we're trying to action on, because those targets are going to turn into fantasy points. He is a between the numbers kind of guy, but also when they get into the red zone, Lamar Jackson is looking for his tight ends. So we give up Jake Ferguson as part of our DAC stack. I'm okay with that. I think that Jake Ferguson is a great option. Again, more targets than Isaiah Likely for sure, but I think there's a little bit of a more touchdown upside with Likely here. All right. And we're going to take Sampson. This winds up our room here. We have Sampson, Montgomery, Swift, Chuba, Bucky. It's not a big name room, but it's definitely a super serviceable room to get behind. When we look at Dylan Sampson and the potential that he plays, the news with Judkins is that Judkins hasn't signed yet. They're waiting for the legal matter to be kind of resolved before they sign him. So this gives room for Ford. This gives room for Sampson. We said that Sampson was going to climb up the board. Sampson has climbed up the board. He went from around pick 17 to around pick 13. So I'm losing out on a lot of value for people that drafted Sampson down here as opposed to right here. They get that extra player. You're also seeing with the news that Noah Fant was released, Elijah Arroyo climbs up from being a 20th round guy, 18th round guy, to a 13th round guy. So a lot of things are moving around, moving parts. I like Andrews' example, like I just said. I think that Andrews is one of those guys where all but I believe, I can't remember the stat exactly, but I believe all of his touchdowns in his career, minus maybe 3, have come in the red zone. And the same goes for like Isaiah Likely. So these are 2 teams with potent offenses that are going to pass the ball a good amount each game. They complete a good amount of passes each game. We have to take advantage of that when it comes to it. Baltimore threw the ball 27 times per game last year. Correct me. I stand corrected. That's 31st in the league in terms of passing attempts per game, but extremely efficient passing attempts per game, because those pass attempts are happening in the red zone, guys. So, keep that in mind. And if anything were to go in the direction that Derrick Henry wouldn't be able to complete a whole game in the season, you could see those passing numbers go up. So definitely a challenge, picking likely. Would he have been picked over Jake Ferguson? I was hoping to get both of them. We take some challenges there sometimes. So do we want Pat Bryant? Do we want Thielen? I think we could also build in Zach Ertz as well. All right. Let's take Thielen to kind of beef up the front end of the season here in terms of pass attempts per game. Thielen is going to be on a team that is going to pass the ball a decent amount. Yeah, and that's the thing, Jamie, after he did recover from that, and that's why I think that he's a tremendous value. I mean, Joe might tell you otherwise, but if I can get a tight end that has touchdown upside in the 9th round, I'm going to take it more often than not. He went 103. I could have definitely built him into this lineup. Didn't, probably should have, but I do likely to, at points in time during the season, to get more looks maybe than Mark Andrews, because again, likely is going to be the future of the tight end with this team, as Mark Andrews does age a little bit more. So I'm okay with it. In the eliminator, I have them both. To be honest with you, I know it's crazy, but again, we've got to take advantage of some of those opportunities. All right. So we could go Zach Ertz here to build out, some opportunities for that Dallas game if we wanted to, but I am going to build Pat Bryant. Taking 2 Denver wide receivers is a little bit of a risk, especially when they're not named Cortland Sutton. But again, I do expect Bo Nix, that offense, to be a little bit more refined this year. A couple more pass attempts here and there will definitely be beneficial for Mims and for Bryant. The only way that those 2 players really get screwed out of attempts is if a guy like Vedley or if, for example, Franklin catches on. So if either of those 2 guys catch on, or if Ingram, is the missing piece to this offense, maybe those 2 picks are not 2 picks that you definitely want to make. But I am willing to take some shots there. I'm also willing to take a shot on guys like Mason Taylor. The Jets are a team, guys, that, like we said, in terms of pass attempts per game last year, because they had Aaron Rodgers, they were throwing the ball a lot. But you look at the Steelers, for example, we're down here at 29 attempts per game with Russell Wilson and just the way they run the ball, and with Justin Fields as well. Justin Fields is not the most efficient passer by any means of the imagination, but he does allow for opportunities for tight end. So don't sleep on Mason Taylor at pick 184 or around pick 184, especially with Arroyo climbing, with Chig climbing as well. He is a good value down here if you can get him. There goes Jatavion Sanders. Yeah, and we read some stats that basically is like, if you're not taking the top tight ends, and you're taking anybody in this, Mark Andrews through Dallas Goedert, they're kind of all the same, and for what, in terms of production that they could potentially give us. So there goes Mason Taylor, but we went with Cade Otton. Cade Otton's attempts went up whenever those wide receivers went down. Again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the higher side of passing attempts per game, 32 pass attempts per game, 16th in the league in that. So, over around half of the league I'm willing to take some shots on Otten there. So we're in the 17th round. We're 5-2-5-7-2. Let's shoot a shot at a tight end here, and let's go after Theo Johnson. When we look at tight end targets, last year, Pat Freiermuth had about 4 targets per game, but he did have games where he had 8, 11, 6, 4. That's all after Fields went out, but also before when Fields was in. That's 4, 4, 5, 7. So that's why I'm not selling Mason Taylor. I'm buying Mason Taylor. I'm buying Theo Johnson. And I am okay. I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, Bob, your tight end room's weak. Likely Otten, Theo Johnson. But if there's one area of my draft in best ball that I'm okay people saying it's weak is the tight end category. Because, again, once you get out of Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle, any one of these players can end up in the top 5 at the position, as long as they have the opportunities to do that. It's all about those opportunities. And we saw last year with Cade Otton, when those wide receivers went down, Baker was still slinging, and he had 10, 10, 11, 8. When one of the wide receivers was down, he had 8, 9. When all the wide receivers were healthy, he had about 3, 4. So again, the opportunities could be there, and they might. But we're going to take advantage of that down here in the 16th round as we wrap up this first Best Ball Mania. We are going to do another Best Ball Mania today, right after this one. So if anybody wants to jump in, please feel free to do that. So we're sitting here at 2-5-7-3. I'm okay not taking another running back. I think we should take another wide receiver. Ray is interesting to me in terms of, completions per game with Atlanta. Atlanta had 21 completions per game. Miami's up there as well. So a guy like Nick Westbrook-Akine is interesting enough. There goes Valdez-Scantling. Torrey Horton's a guy to keep your eye on as well. I just wish a guy like Jermaine Burton wasn't so crazy. Cincinnati, Seattle, Miami, Vegas, Detroit, all at the top end of passing attempts per game. Dallas as well. We're going to take Ray filling in. So a little bit of an interesting team. We're going to review it a little bit before we jump into the next one. So we have Kyler and Dak. Again, 2 players that not many people really, really want to take chances on, but around their ADPs, I'm okay with it. We take Bucky, Chuba, DeAndre Swift, Montgomery, and Dylan Sampson. The opportunities for these running backs to be successful are going to be there. Hopefully they are successful. And then we take a look here in terms of opportunities. While Marvin Harrison is at kind of that lower end, he still has a high degree of upside going into this season. We have CD, Marv, Rashee Rice. We got a little bit of that action there. Shaheed, Mims, Thielen, Pat Bryant, Ray McLeod. Thielen is most likely on his way out, but he is still a good target earner for that team. You could not take Thielen there and maybe split it into Coker in the last round. Ray had his best season last year. While it wasn't an elite season by any metric of the imagination, it was still a season that he did better than previous seasons in. And Ray earned 5 targets a game. We go into the back half of last year where Penix was in. We see 11 targets, 7 targets at the end of the season, a game with 1 target. So, he's a player that you're willing to take a chance on in the last round. Maybe Nick Nash takes some opportunities away from him. Maybe Kyle Pitts takes some opportunities away from him. But I think, all things said and done, that this is a relatively solid team. So in the chat right now, anybody who's in the chat that wants to join this next draft that we're doing, I'm going to click enter at 447. At 447, we're going to click enter, and we're going to do our second Best Ball Mania of the day. We're probably only going to do 2 today, guys. So we're waiting on 5 people in this draft. Again, let's take a look. If anybody missed the data that we showed about just in general team dynamics at the beginning of the show, just reviewing it real quick. Again, this schedule comes from the grid schedule on ESPN. And we were talking about ways that you could build your team based upon week 15, week 16, week 17. Maybe you don't push all the way into that Jamar stack with Burrow, even, as it's being built many, many, many times. That might be the stack that you need to win it. But there are other ways that you can have some chances. We also took a look at the most passing attempts allowed per game. Again, these stats came from team rankings. Completion percentage allowed per game, offensive pass attempts allowed per game, offensive completions per game, and most rushing attempts allowed per game. This and taking a look at how many rushing attempts each team had as well. This gives us a kind of a good look to say, okay, where would it be good to invest in certain players in? Last year, taking a look here, draft starts in 56 seconds. Taking a look here, these teams, again, this comes from team rankings. Indy, Philly, Green Bay, Baltimore, Steelers, Buffalo, Chargers, Tennessee, New Orleans, all down below 20 completions per game. Okay, well, what all happened to make that go awry? Well, obviously, Anthony Richardson is not a great passer. Philadelphia, they were running the ball 36 times a game. They had the lead most of the time, no reason to pass. Green Bay, Jordan Love, hurt, also a lot of running. Baltimore, you were in the lead with Derrick Henry half the game, so you didn't need to pass that much. Steelers weren't efficient at all. Again, Buffalo, same thing. You could run the ball with Josh Allen. You could run the ball with James Cook. You didn't need to throw it a lot. Chargers ran 26 attempts per game. We're sitting down there at the 12th position, boys. Yikes. I see Ant in the chat there too. Love it. Good to see Ant in the chat and also in this draft. Loving it. So, taking a look and seeing that, definitely is eye-popping when you're targeting players from those offenses early. Particularly a guy like A.J. Brown, extremely efficient, 27% of the target share, but they're only passing the ball 25 times a game. So not a lot of meat there to build off of. But if that were to go sideways with Saquon and those were to come up a little bit more, you see where the opportunities could be. So buying in A.J. Brown means that you're probably buying into this passing attack getting better. Same thing goes for Baltimore, Steelers, Buffalo, Chargers, Tennessee as well. New Orleans had 20 completions per game. You obviously hope that that's going to improve if you're a fan of New Orleans. Yeah, so Jamie, Wednesday is Joe's at Cedar Point. So anybody wondering where Joe is, Joe's at Cedar Point with his family. But I'm going to hit up some wild card stuff on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we're thinking maybe an eliminator. The Badge Bros is kind of cool. 16 leagues, so everyone will be stacked. I'm digging it. On Wednesday, we'll hit up a Badge Bros. Easy peasy. All right, we're taking Neighbors for sure here, guys. And then we're taking Drake London. I told you if we had the opportunity to do it, we would do it. Passing on my boy Devon A-Chain, passing on A.J. Brown, passing on Jonathan Taylor and Bucky, building out Malik Neighbors and Drake London. Now, I don't like the fact that, Russell Wilson was on the team with some of the least passing attempts per game. I also don't like that, I do like that Jameis Winston is there. I do like that Jackson Dart is there. The schedule is a little bit tricky, coming down towards the back end of the schedule. We have, like I said, if you're a Giants fan, you have Washington, Minnesota, and Las Vegas. However, Las Vegas and Minnesota allowed the most passing attempts per game. So Malik Neighbors with 11 targets on average per game last year. Even if that goes down to 9, you're still getting an elite option. Same with Drake London. Drake London is one of those players. Also, you have Tampa Bay, Arizona, and the Rams. Tampa Bay and Arizona, where Tampa Bay particularly was at the top of the list, so week 15 for sure. And the Rams were not that far down the list as well. So you don't often see me on air taking Malik and Drake London. I do like Devon A-Chain at that value as well. Jahmyr Gibbs and Bucky, a little bit of a nice build. we've built that team before. Ant Go and Saquon and T. Love T's opportunity this year, especially on a team that has the opportunity to pass 33 times per game. But Jamie, yeah, on Wednesday, we're going to hit up some Badge Bros. We're going to hit up probably an Eliminator, and anybody in the chat who's there will be able to join. I'm really excited to see what the Badge Bros is all about, because like I said, I did like that rookies and sophomores. That was only 4. For a guy like you, Jamie, that's in that really puts a lot of focus and attention in Dynasty, that rookies and sophomores is probably a good way to get a little bit of an advantage on some people, especially thinking for this year, who's going to be, how you could build a team on that to get a little bit different, especially in the back end. Brock Bowers falls all the way to the back end of the second round. We have not seen that happen in a while. Terry McLaurin at the top end of the 3rd round. Can't say I agree with that one. So we're looking at pick 36, 37. Kyron should be there. Again, if the volume is there, he's getting around 25 carries per game. Not a lot in the target room, but if we can get those carries, I'm in it. There goes Adams. Rice is going to continue to drop. Like we said, we just got Rice in the 5th round of the draft that we just did. And I think that I am very comfortable for that. Yeah, Jamie. I mean, like, for me, I've been hammering the $5 tournaments and the $10 tournaments a lot. Joe's bankroll right now is a little bit bigger. So, he's got a little bit more of the DraftKings in there, but I do think that it's smart to invest in a lot of different things. Like, we talk about maxing, right? We talk about 150 maxing, and the person that won it last year didn't 150 max, so, taking advantage where you can take advantage of, getting players, getting picks, entering into tournaments, I think is really smart. So we're going Kyron here, taking advantage of the carries that we have. And Joe will be happy. Take Lamar. Rushing attempts are going to be there. Again, if Derrick Henry is if Derrick Henry ends up going by the wayside, Lamar's passing attempts are going to go up. His upside is definitely in the rushing category. In the 4th round there, top of the 4th round, I don't mind that at all. Yeah, I noticed that. The Terry pick is still unique, because I don't see a lot of people doing a Chase and Terry McLaurin. But if I were that Chase drafter, Ant, I totally would have. I'd have maybe did something a little bit wild. Maybe take Brees at the top of the 3rd, maybe. I don't really like Terry there. But a Jamar, Brock Bowers, Marvin Harrison would have been unique enough. You don't often see that build at all. I like your build right now with Saquon as your hero, T, Devontae Adams, and Tet as should be really high target earners. You saw Rashee Rice just go there in the 4th round. Tyreek, Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice. Not a bad combination. Jamie, I am probably not doing the $500 draft. My wife would not be happy with me, putting in that $500, but I might be able to convince Joe to split one with me and we do one together, most likely. The Little Dalmatian was wild. I was telling Joe, I didn't even have the chance. Like, this is the thing. I didn't even have any chances to do 60 of them. So I told Joe, I was like, Joe, Little Dalmatian's out. It's $1. These things are going to be wild. He goes, all right, cool. So I did like 3 when my son was sleeping one night. And then the next day it was over 75% full. So I clicked and I did 10 at one time, 10 20-second drafting ones at one time. And it was the wildest thing. I'll show you what those teams are after we do this draft, Jamie. I wasn't even aware of who I was taking at points in time because it was so fast, because I was basically like the same pick like in almost every draft, it felt like. But I only got, I think, like 13 of those in before the tournament closed. Like, people were hammering those. Absolutely hammering those. Cortland Sutton, I like that. All right. So we have some decisions to make here. We can say what we want about Zay for sure. I mean, 6.8 targets per game, really low income kind of targets. But if he's there, building Mark Andrews are likely in there. Do we take Bateman? You know, we're going to take Zay. And our board cleared pretty fast. So we're going to shoot after Alvin Kamara there. So we got 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and sitting there with 4 wide receivers, 1 running back. Curious what you do here in the 6th. And I think Alvin Kamara, we have some chances to be successful with Alvin Kamara. Again, facing Carolina, the Jets, and Tennessee, which are allowing a good amount of rushing attempts per game. Tennessee with 29, Jets at 29, Carolina at 34. The only thing you got to worry about with Kamara, does he stay healthy? Is the line good? Where are you going to – is he going to be there all season? Is he going to complete the season and be healthy? That kudos to you, Jamie, because for me, these slow drafts, just taking the Scott Fishbowl as an example, I am not built for slow drafts because I'm sitting there like while I'm playing with my son, I'm saying like, did you make your pick yet? 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 Because I'm off for the summer because, I work at a school. We're not in session over the summer. So like I have a lot of time to think about, my pick, and those like slow drafts are not for me. I know they're for some people, and I probably could have cleared a lot of those because the best thing about those Dalmatians were you could have maxed that at, $100, $101. You could have maxed that at, and that would have been great. Because the payout was really nice on those. So we're going to we'll take a look at my teams. I do want to take a look at your teams and see what your highest was there. Yeah, the Fast Puppy 2 is filling up too. So if anybody wants to enter into those, the Fast Puppy's filling up. I'm probably not going to do any more rookies and sophomores. I think I did like 10. In terms of like rookies and sophomores, right? That specific tournament, in terms of ways to be unique, is if players fall or if you take some back end guys, and we'll take a look at all that too. Joe Mixon in the 6th round. If that line is any good by any stretch of the imagination, he could have just as much value as a guy like James Cook. Pairing it there with DeAndre Swift, I like it. So we have some target earners that are a little bit unique down here. Aaron Jones might be on the slate for us as well if he still makes it back to us. This might be a Josh Downs, Aaron Jones turn. So as you can see, we don't have a lot of correlation at all to any picks coming out for us right now outside of Kyron and Drake London. We don't have any Packers. Let's go back here. We don't have any Bengals. We don't have any Pats for the Baltimore side. And for Kamara, we're not Carolina, Jets, Tennessee. So taking Tony Pollard might be a play, but I think we're going to take Spears a little bit later. And Malik, ideally you'd want to get Ideally, with Malik Neighbors, you want to take advantage of that Vegas game. And we got Minnesota there, week 16 with Aaron Jones. So we have some correlation. All right, I'm cool with that. Not the sexiest picks in the world. Again, Josh Downs could be a bummer, but we'll see. Yeah, Jamie, I feel that. I feel that. And the other thing too is like with my little boy, sometimes like I don't want to make people wait either myself. So like if we go like we did to the park today, I don't want to make people wait on the click, and I don't want to have like 5 picks, you know. I like to just do them, get them out of the way, because, you know, my mind is fully invested in the one draft at a time rather than 30 at a time or 5 at a time. Again, they're not for everybody like myself, but they are for a lot of people. And they're a good way to clear it up. So like if you are maxing, especially that, I wish I could have got more into that dollar tournament. And it really screwed up. And it really, you know, the $3 and $1 tournaments, I don't know why they just don't do it in you know, increments of 5, or just do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 20. I personally, I think I'd like to keep even numbers in there. They do all these odd numbers. All right, so we didn't get Spears. That'd have been nice. So the guy here at number 1 has Jamar and Terry, and hasn't taken another wide receiver since then. Took Burrow and Mahomes. Has RJ, Caleb, Spears, and Tootin. Okay, I mean, that works. That absolutely works. We might take Jordan Love down here, guys, as the actual bring back to Lamar. Where is Jordan Love saying that? Is Jordan Love at 126? Yeah, he wouldn't make it back around, potentially. He might. A lot of quarterbacks going off the board, so he might. We'll see. We're definitely going to queue up Mark Andrews. Do we go Ingram, Shaheed, get a little bit more of that New Orleans action? Should I have that much faith in New Orleans? Well, no. And like I said, if I don't get Mark Andrews here, queuing up and getting likely a little bit later, not a bad thought. All right, so we're going to take Andrews. There's Shaheed, there's Bateman. I don't know if I want to take Bateman. We're just gonna take our double tight end here. So we're gonna take Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram. Not the best picks in the world right here in terms of our team build. Maybe we should have went Bateman to get some more Lamar, but I'm okay with going Mark Andrews and having Mark Andrews and Zay. This will be a team that just doesn't have Bateman because I took Zay a little bit earlier. So double tapping tight end there at the top end of this run. I'm okay with that. It also leaves us open to maybe take Isaiah Likely a little bit later to get, you know, the touchdowns that are probably going to be red zone touchdowns that Zay Flowers might not get. All right, and Diggs and Kyler, love it. You know I like Kyler too much. Joe, I mean, Joe and I were talking the other day, and after we went off air, and he goes, "You like Kyler Murray way too much." It's not that I like him too much, but I think the opportunities could get better this year for Kyler. And Kyler's one of those guys that we've talked about, just in general, that he has or he can finish in the top 5 of quarterbacks. He does have 30-point upside, and in tournaments like this, I want to take advantage of guys that have 30-point upside. Week 2 last year, he finished number 1 quarterback overall. Week 5 last year is the 5th quarterback overall. Week 7, 5th quarterback overall. Week 10, 4th quarterback overall. And the last week of the season last year is the 4th quarterback overall. Yes, he also finished as the 30th quarterback and the 24th and the 25th quarterback overall. But I want to hit some of those big spikes, and I think it's possible with a guy like Kyler Murray, especially down here in the 9th round. You know, you could say the same thing about a guy like Patrick Mahomes as well. Patrick Mahomes in the 7th. Do you want to take a chance on Patrick Mahomes in the 7th or Kyler in the 9th? Brock Purdy in the 9th. I was just going back and watching a couple of our shows that we did at tournaments that were prior to, the draft. Baker was up here in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. He's fallen. He's fallen a bit. Not too much, but a bit. So we should have taken Jordan Love. Thought he might come back to us. That's okay. No worries there. Bateman and Shaheed are still on the table. They are probably going to get snapped up. Lots of guys had 5 wide receivers here. Uncle Phil and Rob. We should be worried about Uncle Phil. He's probably going to take one of them. Be nice if we can double tap it. If we don't, that's fine too. So there goes Shaheed. I knew Ant would like him. I wanted to take a look at Ant's team. Yeah, that's a nice core of wide receivers. Having Shaheed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as your 6th wide receiver, I think is solid. Cam Scattaboo, still on the board. Still on the board. Cam Scattaboo still on the board. I don't want him, but it's interesting how certain drafts push certain other players down the board. We'll take Bateman. Ended up getting Bateman. And we'll take Hollywood here. Now, again, Hollywood's a guy that I don't normally draft, often injured, former Raven, former Arizona Cardinal. But when we look at a guy like Hollywood Brown and we take a look at the stats, taking a look at Brown, he's sitting here at 7.5 targets per game in the 2 games that he did play with Kansas City. 8 and 7 targets. If you don't like the fact that Rice is maybe going to be suspended, you could get a guy here that has the same amount of targets per game if you take just a smaller sample size as Josh Downs, Brian Thomas Jr., Mike Evans. If he plays and he's healthy, could be an elite pick down here in the 12th round. I know I don't often do it, but it's interesting to see where his, that high amount of targets and how that could, build into your team a little bit later. So, we got Hollywood. That builds off of Evan Ingram. We got a little bit of a mini. We still have no Packers players. We only have 3 running backs. So 3 running backs that could potentially get hurt. So maybe we push a couple of running backs here. We're at 1, 3, 6, 2. Likely is still on the board. Bryce Young is on the board as well. There goes Dobbs here as well. This is probably going to see. I hate week 8. Maybe we could get, a Geno to go with Dante Thornton as a play against Malik Neighbors week 17. Strong play, maybe not, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. All right, so there goes Likely. Magic Cottage took Likely and Warren. Ant's up. Damn you, Ant. Damn you. 13th round. That's a good pick. We do need some running backs. I don't know if I really want any of these guys. So, maybe we queue up Allen and Ford for next round. And we go to whoever we want here. QJ still on the board is interesting to me. In this draft here, Tillman fell. So will he go 155? Should I click him at 156? Decent enough if he's there. All right, so QJ went. We'll build in Tillman. And we will we'll take Bigsby. Not a huge fan there, but again, in the carries that he did have, efficient enough. I worry about Bashal Tutin, but again, we're taking Tank Bigsby 4 rounds after Bashal Tutin and 5 rounds after Travis Etienne. There's a little bit of built-in value there if you're going after a guy like Bigsby. Most rushing attempts allowed per game last year. We look at Jacksonville's playoff schedule. Denver was low in terms of that, but the Jets and Indy were high up there. So if something happens, you know, we could definitely circle our way back on a guy like Tank Bigsby. Yeah, I know. I know you were going to take Bryce. I know. The only question, Ant, that I had about you taking Bryce is with the amount of quarterbacks that were taken after that, is were you going to go Bryce in the 14th instead of the 13th? I was not expecting you to double tap quarterbacks there, but I get it because you have Adams as well. Like I said, the stack of Adams with Matt Stafford / Puka is an elite level stack. You know, the Rams were sitting at 21 completions per game last year. That was 14th in the league. And in terms of passing attempts total, they were 12th in the league. So, like I said, they usually only pass to 2 guys. That's a good advantage for you, especially in the 13th, 14th round. I mean, take that for what it's worth. So there goes Geno. Cam Ward's kind of the only other quarterback on the board that I would want to pair with Lamar. Has a high degree of upside. I might be double-clucking running backs here. We'll see. This is also an opportunity to go after a guy like Mason Taylor. All right, so there's Braylon Allen went off the board. Everybody here, Rab, I might have to worry about Rob. Rab is probably going to take Cam Ward. So let's see what happens. Oh, Ant, you took Judkins. I didn't even see that. As a 4th running back with the falling value, 20 picks after ADP. Sure, take advantage of that. So there goes Cam Ward. Oh, well. There goes Thornton. All right, so this is going to be Ford, and this is going to be Taylor. And I only got 1 running back here, or 1 quarterback here. Not happy about that. Not happy about that whatsoever. Definitely not in love with this team, but it's a team that could be productive. We're cleared out on that. We have 3 tight ends. I always like to try to get 3 tight ends, 7 wide receivers, 5 running backs. We do want another quarterback on this roster. But the question is, do we take Russell Wilson? And do we take a guy like Jackson Dart? Do we get a little bit different here? Working as QB2 in OTAs. Is Russell Wilson going to get hurt? You know, I mean, I don't necessarily need Dart. Russ is absolutely safer. The schedule is brutal at the beginning of the season. Russell Wilson, not the most efficient guy. Let him cook. I like Russ. Remains entrenched. We could go after Tyler Shook. Don't need him to be productive. We do have a correlation as a stacking partner with Kamara. We don't have any Tennessee late. Be nice to get a quarterback here. Let's see what's on the board. Russ is safer, but I've got Lamar. Do we want to play safe or not? Winston is absolutely still there. I love it. Shook for the Kamara stat. I do have Malik Neighbors here too, though, Ant. That's the question. I know you're in this as well, but I've got Malik Neighbors too. So the question is, Do we double tap? There goes Shook. Shook as a third quarterback on Sleeve's team. So Shook's not going to be there for us. Wasn't expecting him to tap another quarterback. Waller, 17th round, where he should be. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go Russ. It is a safe play. Safe floor if Lamar, who isn't injury prone, goes down. And like I said, we're going to take a look after this draft here to take a look at the little Dalmatians that happened while I was drafting 10 of them at a time with the 20-second clock. Could take a back end DeAndre Hopkins. I don't see any value necessarily in that. There goes Juwan. These are guys that I'm thinking about. Oh, I should have built Theo Johnson on this team. I took Mason Taylor. I took Evan Ingram. Should have built Theo Johnson. Take a fourth tight end. No, we don't. We're going to take. We took, it double tapped us. That's fine. Whatever. All right, so we cleared up the board. The auto pick gave us Dart. That's fine. 3 quarterbacks. Usually, typically in Ball Mania, I'm not building 3 quarterbacks, but it auto picked for us. I was going to take Coker there. Couldn't make a decision between Coker and I like Theo. Theo with Tucker Kraft. I've had that combination before. Clearing up the board. Let's see what Ant does as this final round. Io Manor came in to come along with Cam Ward and Chig. This guy's got a little bit of, he's got like a full-on, Bulldog has a full-on, what we think could be a Tennessee stack. After Calvin Ridley, Cam Ward, Chig, and Io Manor. Ant with Jatavion, going Jatavion, Arroyo, Ertz as a triple back end. Love the back end tight end strategy. With the signing, with Arroyo signing the contract and Noah Fant out, that speaks volumes of Arroyo, I think. It also speaks volumes of Noah Fant. Yeah, Daniel Jones was still there too. I did not mean to double-click quarterback here, guys. I will tell you that. Did not mean to double-click quarterback here. Jackson Dart was a total auto pick. He was at the top of my board because I forgot to clear him off. But again, going with Malik Neighbors, I'm okay with it. Not the strongest team in the world, but should be relatively competitive, and I'm okay double tapping this quarterback. Even with that auto pick, having Lamar there, we need like a lights out game from either of them. I wasn't thinking ahead. Should not have taken Taylor there. Should have waited for Theo Johnson. He should have been the pick in the last round to go along with that Russell Wilson stack. That was a total bonehead move on my part. So let's take a look. I told you guys we would look at the did not get, so the German Shepherd, I was only able to get 5 into the German Shepherd. These were the super flexes on the German Shepherd. Not sexy to say the least. We got cooked on this one, guys. We waited and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited on quarterback. But I'm loving Jahmyr Gibbs, Devin Achane, Bucky Irving a lot. Nico, JSN, Calvin Ridley, Zay, Juwan, Debo, Cooper Kupp, Tillman, Pierce. Again, I'm okay with having Darnold there. He could lose his job. Should have taken Milrow as well. But we took the 2 back-end, back-end guys. If Sam Darnold doesn't play a full season, this roster's cooked. I'm okay with that. This was another one we drafted the other day. This, again, was the German Shepherd. We're going to take a look at those little Dalmatians, like I said, Jamie. Josh Allen, Shook, Wilson. Taking Wilson, is not a guy that I had been taking a lot in the Puppy Superflex, but in the German Shepherd, I took him a little bit more. Achane, Brown, Hampton, I think is a nice build here. Taking Sean Tucker as the play against if Bucky Irving doesn't go. Nico, Rashi, Xavier Worthy, Godwin, Keon Coleman, Bryant, Pierce, Coker. Okay. Wasn't able to get any of Patrick Mahomes, but I did get Kelsey, Kincaid, and Taylor. Not terrible. I like this one a little bit more. This one, again, is the German Shepherd, but super flex. We got Hurts, Rodgers, and Shook. A little bit of a safer floor on the quarterback market. Genty, Irving, Chase Brown, I think, is just as elite as a start as you can get. Breece Hall as well to add in there as 4 running backs. You only need to start 2, but then there's the super flex position. So, and the flex position here, I had ended up with Rice here. I bought the falling value on Rice. As you can see, he fell a lot in the super flex as well. These wide receivers are not as good. Hopefully it pans out for me there. But I did want to take a look at the Little Dalmatians that we had. Yeah, I was only able to get into 13 Little Dalmatians. So, again, we're going to go through this, guys. And Jamie, I drafted, so the first 3 here are the ones that I drafted just one at a time. These next 10 are teams that I drafted all at one time. Some good, some not so great. So this one, I think, is pretty strong in terms of like the top end right here. Daniel Stroud, Henry Williams, Etienne, Blue. I don't like the news that Blue is seen as lazy, but it's a perfect time to kind of buy Blue if people are starting to fade him a decent amount. Nico, Ridley, Debo, Mooney, Higgins. It was really hard to kind of, as I was doing these 10 at a time, to get correlation and stacking partners because I was only really paying attention to like 2 at a time. This one I like a decent amount. Lamar and Bryce. Lamar with Derrick Henry for those rushing attempts. Travion, Aaron Jones, Tracy. I think this core is fine. And again, this wide receiver room is stellar. You know, a lot of targets are going up here, right? So when we look at wide receivers and we see, my anxiety was through the roof. It was 10 at the same time in the fast 20-second drafts. So, and they had just updated their UI. So the updated UI kept pinging my board all the way around, and I couldn't see anything but like the top 10 picks at the time. But again, I think this team turned out. We have Lamar paired down here with Mark Andrews. We also have a decent target earners, right? These are guys that are in the tops of target earning on their teams. We have a group of running backs that can be very successful. It's not ugly yet. Now it gets pretty ugly, guys. So this is, again, 10 drafts at the same time. Super ugly. You can see I waited and waited and waited at quarterback. Waited and waited and waited. I ended up getting 3. 5 running backs here: HN, Cook, Kamara, Tracy, Spears. I think that's solid. Here in the wide receiver market, the reason I took Stafford so late, I had Puka and Adams. Odunze as my 3rd. I'm okay with that. Josh Downs as a 4th. Higgins, Dobbs, Calvin Austin. And again, you know, whenever I see Likely and Taylor, I'm more than likely going to take them. This one's super ugly. Don't really like this one very much. Gino and Cam. This was from pick 11. So you can see pick 10, pick 9, pick 7, pick 11, 9, 8, 6, 11, 1, 6. And basically, like, these were the 3 that I did on my own. But wild. Okay. So taking a look here, and for anybody that did the Little Dalmatian, we're just kind of going over them and seeing, you know, how you have some similarities and differences here. And also in the Little Dalmatian, when you did the 10 at the same time, all fast drafts, you couldn't see your big board. The UI would not let you see your big board. It was kind of like set up like this with all your players, and you couldn't see the big board. So you kind of were just kind of, you weren't able to pay attention to what other people were drafting. This is okay. Not the best. I think Amon-Ra is strong, but I don't have any correlation between Cam Ward, Gino. I've got nothing other than Dante Thornton. So I'm not a big fan of that. This one also not a fan of. Caleb Williams and Gino. I think Caleb Williams or Gino was auto-picked on this one. I can't remember. But H.N. Williams, Henderson, I think is solid enough. Tyrone is my 5th guy with Pollard. I think is very strong. Nico and Adams, I like that as a start. These 3, I love that as a start with Mooney, Tillman, Pierce, and Austin pulling it up. Likely Gesicki and Okonkwo to go along with, you know, if that were Cam, that would have been nice. This one, ugly-ish. Lamar, Aaron Rodgers, okay. Bucky, Kamara, Aaron Jones, Tracy, Tootin, Rashad White. I think I have a lot of Tracy in this tournament because whenever he came up, I was just clicking him. Puka, DJ Moore, Rome. Again, I would have loved to have Caleb in this one. I thought, and this is the thing for anybody watching, I'm just going over. I said, I did 10 at the same time for the, as we wind down here, 10 at the same time as the little Dalmatian. So 10, 22nd points. I thought this draft here of DJ Moore and Rome, I had Caleb. I thought that was the one I had Caleb in. I wasn't paying attention. So I just double clicked DJ Moore and Rome, and wasn't paying attention to the back end. Here, I don't know what happened with this team. Jordan Love, Bryce Young, JT, Hampton, Montgomery, Tracy, Davis, Sampson, and Brooks. You can see, guys, how much Dylan Sampson has risen. Okay. This was drafted while the little Dalmatian was live. Dylan Sampson was a pick 198. Then Judkins, and now look how much he's climbed. Okay. 7 running backs in this one, only 6 wide receivers. A lot of Puka, a lot of Downs, a lot of Ridley. This one I had Trey McBride. Lamar, again, a lot of Lamar. Lamar in at the back end, 11th, 12th is an easy click. This one I waited for my second back rather than taking him early. So this running back room is a little bit gross, a little bit disgusting, but I think this start here, I like that a lot. And to pair up with these wide receivers, I think that's relatively strong. Only 2 tight ends there. This one, kind of weird too. Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers, Bucky, Chase Brown, Chuba, super strong start. Jamar, Waddle, Debo. Again, when you're doing these fast drafts and you're doing them and you're not being able to pay attention to correlation and you're doing 10 at a time, it can get really, really, really spicy. You can see here I double click those tight ends. I think they play really well off one another. So if we take a look at the exposure and we take a look at the exposure of the little Dalmatian, you can see that out of the 13 little Dalmatians that I did draft, again, 10 of them being at the same time, around half have Lamar. Downs, Bucky, Likely, and Tracy were my highest owned players in that little Dalmatian. These are the highest owned quarterbacks in the little Dalmatian. Kind of spread the board around on that. Running backs, you kind of know how I feel about certain backs. Was able to get Dylan Sampson in 2 of them. Spread the board down here. Did not get a lot of Marv. Mike Evans would have gotten a little bit more there had I been able to take a look. And we got a lot of Likely, a lot of, and then kind of just a hodgepodge of various tight ends to kind of play into. So, taking a look, let's take a look at our Best Ball Mania exposure so far. So we have 5 Best Ball Mania teams sitting right there. We're at about 40% on Otten, Likely, and Mark Andrews. We're sitting there at 40% on Bryce Young, 40% on Lamar, 20% on Kyler, 20% on Josh Allen. So a nice percentage there. These 2 obviously kind of tops on my board in terms of value where they're at. Bucky, my boy, have a little bit of Dylan Sampson in there as well. Dylan Sampson, again, has climbed up the board very significantly. So, guys, we are going to come back at you on Wednesday at 3:45. On Wednesday at 3:45, what we're going to do is we are going to talk a little bit more about stats. We're going to go over all the news that's happened over the last couple of days. We're also going to enter in, if it's available still, the Badge Brothers Bowl. The Badge Brothers Bowl is a 6-team draft. So we'd like to see everybody in the chat, whoever pulls up, in that Badge Brothers Bowl. Those are going to fill up relatively quickly. I believe it's a $5 buy-in. We're probably going to do about 3 of those on Wednesday, maybe a little bit more as time allows. So Wednesday, we're going to be doing a Badge Brothers Bowl. We're probably going to do about 3 of them maybe. Maybe we'll do 2 in an eliminator. We'll see what happens. But thanks for joining today. If you missed any of the data that we threw at you at the beginning of the show, go back in, take a look. That data is thanks to Team Rankings and thanks to Fantasy Pros. So we really appreciate that. And feel free to like, follow, subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll join you Wednesday at 3:45. Thanks a bunch, guys. We really appreciate it.